There was an hour every night when Elias Vidal's house was quieter than the countryside outside, and it was at that hour that he would turn off the lamp. Not because he wanted to sleep, but because the darkness was less costly than seeing the things that still occupied the corners. The chair that no one pulled out anymore, the shawl folded over the backrest that he never had the courage to put away or touch, the second cup that remained on the shelf gathering dust as if waiting for a mouth that would never come. He had lived among these objects for 7 years as one lives next to tombs, and perhaps that was indeed what the house had become, a cemetery of small domestic things that continued to live after those who used them. The valley where the farm stood was wide and desolate, surrounded by hills that the moon filled with silver on clear nights and the rain swallowed on dark nights. The people of the village, an hour's cart ride away, spoke of Elias in hushed voices, the way one speaks of someone who was once something else and has become nothing. They said he had been a cheerful man before. They said his wife, Helena, laughed even louder, and that the two of them together made enough noise to fill any harvest festival. No one could say for sure when the laughter had faded, but everyone knew the date when the earth of the hill received 2 graves at once, one large and one so small that the gravedigger wept as he dug it. Helena had died trying to bring their child into the world, and the child had died along with her, never opening his eyes, and Elias had stood there between the 2 graves, holding his hat with both hands, without a tear that people could see, because his tears had sunk deep inside that day and never resurfaced. Since then he worked. It was what he knew how to do with pain, bury it, and sweat. He would get up before sunrise, tend to the animals, repair the fence that always gave way in the same spot, plow, plant, harvest, and when his body demanded rest, he would find yet another job, because resting was dangerous. Resting allowed the memory to breathe. His hands had become thick and cracked, and his shoulders had developed that curvature of someone carrying a weight that no one sees. Woman, for him, had become a forbidden word, not out of hatred, but out of fear. 2 widows from the village had sent messages, baskets of bread. One even appeared one afternoon in a nice dress and with a rehearsed smile, and Elias had been polite to all and cold to all, because every gesture of affection from a woman reopened the wound he spent his days stitching up. He preferred solitude. Solitude didn't die in childbirth. Solitude didn't leave anyone alone. It was on one of those nights of heavy rain, when the whole valley seemed to be sinking in mud and the wind hurled water against the windows in gusts, that there was a knock on his door. Elias was sitting in the dark, as always, listening to the storm, and at first he thought it was a branch hitting the eaves or the old wood of the house itself groaning. But the knocks returned, timid and stubborn at the same time, 3 little taps from thin knuckles, and he knew it was a human hand. No one knocked on Elias Vidal's door at that hour. No one knocked on Elias Vidal's door at any hour. He stood still for a long moment, hoping it was his imagination, that whoever was there would give up and disappear into the rain. But the knocks returned a 3rd time, weaker, almost an apology, and something in that weakness made him get up. When he opened the door, the rain rushed in along with the cold, and in the dim moonlight filtered through the clouds, he saw a young woman. She was soaked from head to toe, her dress clinging to her body, her hair drooping and plastered across her face, and she clutched a bundle of cloth tied in a tight knot to her chest, protecting it from the water, with both arms, as if it were the most precious thing in the world. He was young, very young, with large eyes that the light made frightened, and he trembled so much that his teeth chattered. Elias didn't say anything immediately. He stood there, wide and somber in the doorway, his arms crossed, looking at that small, soaked figure as one looks at a problem one didn't ask for. She opened her mouth to speak, but her voice came out broken, almost lost in the rain. He apologized for the hour. He said he'd seen the light from afar. He knew there was no light at all. He'd turned off the lamp, but he didn't correct her. He said he'd been walking since morning, that he had nowhere to go, that he just needed a dry place to spend the night, a stable, a porch, anything, and that he'd leave with the first ray of sunlight and he'd never have to see her again. He spoke quickly, stumbling over his words, with the fear of someone who'd heard too many no's and learned to fit everything into a single sentence before the door slammed in his face. Elias had the no stuck in his throat. It was there, ready, just as it had always been for everyone who came too close. He opened his mouth to say it. But then a lightning bolt ripped through the sky and illuminated the girl's face for a single instant, and he saw, beyond the fear and the cold, something he recognized with a pang in his chest. He saw the exhaustion of someone who no longer has the strength to plead. He saw that specific weariness he knew intimately, the weariness of someone who carries too much pain for their size, and the no died in his throat. Without saying a word, he took a step to the side and opened the door a little wider, indicating with his head the dark interior of the house. The girl blinked, uncomprehending, as if expecting any answer but that one. Then she went inside, leaving a trail of water on the wooden floor, and Elias closed the door against the storm. He lit the lamp, the first time in a long time that light had returned to that room at night, and in the yellow light he could see her better. She couldn't have been more than 18 or 19. She had a fading purple mark on her jaw, almost hidden, the kind of mark one learns to hide with one's hair. Elias noticed and didn't ask. He wasn't a man of questions. He went to the trunk, took out an old clean blanket, and spread it out for her without touching her, leaving the fabric on the arm of the chair that no one pulled anymore. He said the first thing he had said aloud in days, and he said it softly, almost harshly, because his voice was so little used that she could sleep by the fire that they would see in the morning. Then he took his own blanket and went to lie down in the back room, leaving the door ajar, not out of politeness, but out of an old instinct to keep his ears open. The girl's name was Mariana. He found out the next day when he woke before sunrise, as usual, and found the fire already lit, the embers stirred, and the smell of coffee rising from the kettle. She was standing near the stove, her damp dress still drying on her body, and she had swept the living room floor, found the broom alone, and arranged the folded blanket with a care that house hadn't seen since Helena. Elias stopped at the door and looked at this with a tightness in his chest, somewhere between discomfort and something he didn't want to name. Mariana turned, saw him, and felt awkward, as if she had been caught intruding. She said she didn't know how to thank him, that this was the least she could do, that if he let her, she would work all day in exchange for the song and the food, that she knew how to tend the garden, the chickens, the sewing, that she wasn't trouble, that he wouldn't even notice she was there. Elias poured the coffee into a cup, his own, and stared at the second dusty cup on the shelf for far too long before offering it his own and drinking straight from the tin mug. That was all he said. But it was a yes. The days that followed were filled with distance. Elias didn't know how to coexist, he had forgotten how, and Mariana knew all too well what it meant to occupy space near a man, so the two moved around the farm like two orbits that cross without touching. He in the field, she in the vegetable garden, he in the corral, she in the kitchen. They spoke the bare minimum, the necessary things, work-related matters, and even so, Elias felt her presence like one feels an open window in a house that has been closed for years. A strange wind, uncomfortable at first, entering places he had sealed. He didn't like it. He told himself he didn't like it. At night, lying down, he sometimes heard the soft sound of Mariana humming while mending something by the firelight, a sad and sweet song he didn't recognize, and he would squeeze his eyes shut in anger at feeling his chest soften. She fixed things? That's what he began to notice. She didn't ask, she didn't warn, she simply fixed things. The hinge on the barn door, which had creaked for years, stopped creaking. The fence, where it always sagged, was now firm, with a strand of wire twisted exactly as needed, and Elias watched the repair for a while, trying to understand how she knew how to do it. The chickens, which had been thin and few in number, began laying eggs again. The vegetable garden, which he had abandoned to weeds, became straight rows of cabbage and carrots. And the house, day by day, became a little less like a tomb. Elias didn't thank her. He didn't know how. But he stopped turning off the lamp early. He left the light on later, without even confessing to himself that it was so he could see her figure on the other side of the room and feel that the house had people in it. What finally broke Elias's shell wasn't a grand gesture, it was a calf. On a cold, early winter morning, one of the cows gave birth prematurely, and the calf was born weak, cold, too weak to stand or nurse, one of those that the countryside usually lets die because it's not worth the effort to save. Elias, who had already seen too much die, gave the calf up for lost and went to sleep because saving required hope, and he hadn't kept hope in reserve for a long time. But when he woke before sunrise and went to the corral, he found Mariana kneeling in the straw, still in her nightgown under her blanket, with the calf lying in her lap, wrapped in the cloths she must have spent the night changing, and a cloth soaked in warm milk that she patiently dripped, drop by drop, into the animal's mouth. She had been there for hours, alone, in the cold, without anyone asking, spending the whole night on a life that the world had already discarded. The calf was alive. It was trembling, but it was alive. And Elias stopped at the corral door, looking at it, and something inside him, which had been as hard as 7 years' worth of parched earth, suddenly cracked open and let water through. Because he understood, looking at Mariana kneeling on the straw, that this was exactly the woman who would save anything that others had given up on saving. And he understood, with a shock that almost doubled him over, that he himself had been, for 7 years, a cold and discarded creature lying in the cold, and that without ever announcing it, without ever demanding anything in return, it was he whom she had been warming drop by drop since the night she knocked on the door. One afternoon, he returned from the fields early and found her standing before Helena's shawl, the one that had remained folded on the back of the chair for 7 years, the only object in the house that Mariana had never touched, never moved, never even dusted, as if she knew instinctively that such things shouldn't be touched. She was just looking, with a delicacy in her face that made Elias stop in the doorway. She sensed him there and quickly moved away, apologizing with her eyes, saying she wouldn't touch it, that she had only noticed how beautiful the embroidery was. And then, without him asking, she whispered that a person is kept in the place they left them, and that it was good to leave them that way. That emptiness is also a form of companionship. Elias didn't answer. He went out to the corral and stayed there until nightfall, and when he returned, his eyes were red in a way he blamed on the wind and dust, and Mariana was kind enough to pretend to believe him. It was around this time that the mark on her jaw finally disappeared, and that Elias, one night when the light rain returned against the windows, mustered the courage to ask the only question he had ever asked. He asked where she came from, what had brought her to a night like that on the road. Mariana remained very quiet, her hands still on her sewing, and for a moment he thought he had made a mistake, that he was going to push her back into her silence. But she told him. She told him softly, in a voice without drama, like someone who had already cried all she had, and only the bones of the story remained. She said she had been an orphan since she was a girl, raised by a father who drank, and that at 16 her father had promised her in marriage to a man on the other side of the valley, a man twice her age, a landowner, who paid off her father's debt with her promise. He said he endured it for 2 years, that the mark Elias had seen on her jaw was neither the first nor the worst. That, on the night she ran away, the man had broken the only thing she had left of her mother, a mother-of-pearl comb, and trampled it on the floor just to see her cry, and that, at that moment, something inside her decided she would rather die on the road than die slowly in the house. So she gathered the little she had in the cloth bundle she clutched to her chest, and walked out into the rain, aimlessly, until she saw the silhouette of a house in the valley in the distance, and knocked on any door, because it no longer mattered whose it was. Elias listened to everything without interrupting. And when she finished, he did something he hadn't done in 7 years. He reached across the table and covered Mariana's small bruised working hand with his own, large and cracked, and said nothing, because there was nothing to say that the hand wasn't already saying. They stayed like that for a long time, two castaways from different storms that the same night had thrown onto the same shore, and for the first time since the mud of the valley had brought her to his door, Mariana felt that perhaps there was a place in the world where she didn't need to apologize for breathing. But life rarely allows peace to last without exacting its price. One late autumn morning, a wagon drove up the dirt road, and out stepped a man Elias had never seen before. But he immediately recognized him by the way Mariana paled and cowered behind him in the doorway. It was the man from across the valley, the landowner to whom she had been promised, and he had come with 2 henchmen and a piece of paper he waved in the air as if it were law. He shouted that the girl was his, that there was a contract, that her father had given his word, that he had paid dearly and had come to claim what was his. He called Mariana a runaway, ungrateful worse things, and demanded that Elias hand her over right there, or else he would bring the sheriff, bring the law, bring ruin upon that miserable farm of a bitter widower whom the whole valley knew was half mad from living with ghosts. Elias listened to everything, standing in the doorway, his arms crossed, his face expressionless, just as he had been the night Mariana first knocked. He let the man shout until he was exhausted, and when the silence fell, he spoke, and spoke softly, and there was something in his low voice that made the 2 henchmen exchange glances. He said there was no fugitive there. He said his wife lived on that farm. The word fell like a stone into a well, and Mariana, behind him, held her breath, because there was no marriage, and she knew it, and he knew it, but Elias continued more firmly, saying that any paper that man had was worth less than the manure in the corral, because it was signed with the fear of a little girl, and that the only law he recognized was the one that said, people are not cattle, people are not bought, people are not taken back like a mare that escaped from the fence. He said that the man had been invited to call the sheriff, yes, and that he, Elias Vidal, would be more than happy to tell the sheriff and the whole valley about the marks that girl carried on her body when she arrived, and about the broken mother-of-pearl comb on the ground, and about everything else he had heard on a rainy night. And that if after all that the man still wanted to take the girl, he would have to go over him first, and that he, despite his shoulders bent from so much mourning, still had the strength to plow an entire field and more than enough for that. The man on the other side of the valley sized Elias up with his eyes. He measured his size, his firmness, the dangerous truth Elias had offered to tell the sheriff, and above all, he measured that this bitter widower, whom the valley considered half-mad, had not the slightest trace of fear on his face, only a calmness that was more frightening than anger. He stood for a while with the crumpled paper in his hand. Then he spat on the ground, cursed them both, called Mariana a dirty thing once more, climbed into the cart, and drove away down the dirt road, raising dust, and the dust settled, and the valley fell silent again, and he never returned. When the cart disappeared around the bend, Elias remained standing in the doorway for a moment, and only then did he feel how hard his own heart was beating. He turned inside. Mariana was leaning against the living room wall, her face wet, trembling just as it had on the first night, and she looked at him with a silent, enormous question in her eyes. He had said wife. He had said it to save her. She knew it. It had been a necessary lie thrown in the face of a bad man. But her eyes asked if that was all, if it was just a word of defense, or if there was a truth beneath that word that they had both been pretending not to see for weeks, in the shared cups, in the songs at night, in the large hand covering the small hand on the table. Elias held his hat with both hands, just as he had held it between the two graves on the hill 7 years before, and for a moment his face was only the face of a man terrified of feeling again, terrified of loving again, because to love was to open the door again to the possibility of losing, and he knew the price of loss. He had been living with the price of loss for 7 years. But then he looked at that girl leaning against the wall, the girl who had fixed the hinge and the fence and the chickens and the vegetable garden and, without his permission, the whole house and the man who lived in it. And he understood something that pain had hidden from him for so long. That closing the door so as not to lose anyone was just another way of already having lost everything. That the hill with the two graves would remain there, with him keeping the shawl in the exact place where Helena left it. And that loving Mariana didn't erase Helena, didn't betray Helena, because the heart isn't a barn that only fits one. He took a step towards her, then another, and he said in a hoarse voice, lacking any of the firmness he had used with the man in the cart, that he had said wife because the word came out before he thought, and that he had spent the whole morning, and perhaps the whole weeks, afraid of discovering that the word had come out because it was already what he wanted. He asked, the man who asked no questions, if she would stay, not like someone who pays for a corner with work, but like someone who chooses and is chosen and never again needs to knock on any door in the rain because the door was already hers. Mariana crossed the room and hugged him before he finished, and Elias felt her thin arms tighten around his hunched back, which had carried grief for 7 years, and he felt, with a shock that almost knocked him over, the weight of grief begin to divide, because divided pain becomes half the pain, and divided love becomes double the love, and he had forgotten the simple arithmetic that life had taken from him on the hill. They married the following spring, without a grand celebration, with the village priest and 2 neighbors as witnesses, under the same apple tree in whose shade Elias, as a boy, had seen his parents get married. Mariana wore Helena's shawl over her shoulders, and no one found it strange because Elias had asked with tears in his eyes that she wear it, saying that Helena would have liked it, that Helena would have liked to know that the house was filled with laughter again, that the shawl deserved to feel the sun again after 7 years folded up on a pillow. And that same afternoon, before the small celebration, the two climbed the hill together, and Mariana placed wildflowers in the 2 graves, the large one and the small one, and stood for a while in silence beside the man she loved, both gazing at the wide golden valley below, and she understood that marrying Elias was also marrying his memory, and she received that memory with the same delicacy with which, months before, she had refused to touch the shawl. Their lives didn't become perfect. Perfection is something from poorly told stories. There were years of drought when the harvest barely lasted until winter, and there were nights when the old fear returned to Elias's eyes, and he woke up sweating, stretching his hand in the dark just to feel that Mariana was still breathing beside him, still there, still real. But there was also, with time, the cry of a child filling that house that had been a tomb, a girl with eyes as big as her mother's, and the stubbornness of a thin knuckle knocking on the door of the world, and then a boy with shoulders that promised to become as broad as his father's. And Elias Vidal, whom the whole valley had considered a shell of a man, half mad from living with ghosts for so long, was seen again laughing loudly at the harvest festival, with a woman laughing even louder beside him, and the elders of the village, who remembered how it had been before, nudged each other and whispered that the laughter had returned, without knowing from where, without knowing that it had returned on a night of heavy rain, inside a bundle of cloth pressed against the chest of a soaked girl who had nowhere to go and knocked 3 times, timidly and stubbornly, on the only door in the valley that everyone swore would never open again. And sometimes, on clear nights, when the moon filled the hills with silver, Elias would stop on the porch with his mug of cooling coffee in his hand and look at the dirt road that climbed up to his house. That same road where pain had once come in a cart, and where, before that, salvation had come on foot, walking in the rain. And he thought about how life had a habit of knocking on our door just when we decided not to open it to anyone anymore. He thought about how he had been a swallowed yes away from sending Mariana back to the storm. He thought about how the no he had kept for the world his whole life had died in his throat at the very only time it needed to die. And he thanked her, without a word, in the silent way that was the only way he knew how to thank her. The girl who had nothing, whom the valley would have looked down upon, who had been sold like cattle and beaten like an animal, and who even so had arrived at his house carrying, inside a bundle of worn cloth, the only thing he had been sure for 7 years that he would never have again, a second chance at having a family, and the courage which he no longer had to open the door. Because in the end, That's what Mariana had brought that night, and nobody, not even she, knew it at the time. It wasn't just a bundle of old clothes and a broken mother-of-pearl comb. It was living proof, soaked and trembling in the doorway, that the people life humiliates the most are usually the ones who still keep, hidden beneath all the mud, the greatest reserve of love that exists, love that survived what should have killed it, and that is why it is the strongest and most faithful of all. Elias had opened the door for fear of losing again, and what entered, in the end, was everything he thought he had already lost forever. And every time it rained heavily in the valley, and the water lashed against the windows in bursts, the two would look at each other from across the same room, now filled with light and children's voices, and say nothing, because they didn't need to. They both knew. The rain, which had taken so much from each of them, had also been, on that particular night, the only road capable of bringing them together.